Welcome to Soccer Morning on NASN. Here's your host, Jason Davis.
Happy Friday, everybody. Jason Davis with you. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. The website you should visit for all of the North American Soccer Network programming. And then you should go to soccermorning.com and visit our page to help support the show because this is a listener-supported program. If you enjoy what we do, today's show is fantastic from beginning to, well, the beginning is me, but it's still fantastic from the beginning to the end. Today, Musa Okwonga joins us to talk Manchester United. Always a fascinating topic. Musa is always enlightening. Then Daniel Gordon, the director of Hillsborough, the 30 for 30 documentary by ESPN Films on the tragedy in 1989, the FA Cup semifinal, which 96 Liverpool fans were killed. We'll talk to Daniel Gordon about his film. I've seen it. It is amazing from beginning to end. It is appointment viewing Tuesday night, 8 o'clock on ESPN. You better set your DVR or get in front of your television screen because you need to see the film. Now, we were talking about this, Trevor and I. It's probably not a lot of new information for Brits who were either alive and aware of what was going on at the time or have been following the story for the last 25 years because a new inquest is happening right now into the cover-up that happened there with the South Yorkshire police, in the aftermath of those people dying in Hillsborough. So we'll talk to Daniel Gordon about all of that. And one of those things is that the documentary cannot be shown in the UK right now because of the inquest. That's fascinating detail right there. So we'll get to that. And then a little bit later on in the show, Kyle McCarthy will join us to talk about MLS, talk about the salary dump from MLS, the MLS Players Union, which we get twice a year. It's a semi-annual exercise in which we debate the value of this player and the overvalued this player, the salary, the 16 million, 13 million, whatever teams are paying. Got to do all of that. Got to break it all down. Even though those numbers aren't necessarily 100% accurate most of the time. How about all of the time? Well, most of the time. I always find it fascinating. You get that salary dump, and then immediately players are sort of out there saying, it's not really like that. Taylor Twellman, former MLS player, current ESPN analyst, was quick to tweet, "This is not how it really is. Take these numbers with a grain of salt." And I think it's interesting to consider why the numbers come out. All the way back, we sort of just take the numbers as they are and we start processing them. We don't really consider the source. And I'm not saying that the Players Union is doing anything wrong or they're fudging the numbers. I'm sure they're using the best information they have. But they are obviously trying to direct the narrative when they do things like that. When they release, because MLS isn't going to release the numbers. MLS is not transparent. MLS is all about hiding things, keeping it quiet. When we talk about it, this is something that people have been bringing up for some time. The idea of releasing the allocation numbers. How much allocation money does Team A have? How much does Team B have? The part of the reason MLS has been slow to do that, and they keep lip service, keep talking about maybe doing it. Part of the reason they've been slow to do it is because if a team's allocation situation is understood, it affects their bargaining power. It affects how, when they go into that room with the player agent and say, this is what we want to pay your player, the agent, the less information he has about their financial situation under the salary cap, the less leverage he has. Now, maybe MLS will get to the point where they release those numbers. We all want to see more transparency. I think anybody begrudges the players, especially the ones in the middle and lower third of the league, a pay raise. And that's, again, part of the reason the Players Union releases the salaries. Because it's not about Michael Bradley at $6.5 million. It's about those guys at the other end. It's about the starters, the guys who are going to play 30 games this year, who are making $45,000 a year. Because there's some of those guys out there. I don't have any names right now, but I'm sure SB Nation and Bleacher Report and all of the team blogs have broken it all down. Here's the guy. Remember when Stuart Holden was making $40,000 a year? Remember that? And he was going to leave. And he actually had a sit down with Don Garber in New York, in which Garber said, we want to keep you. Let's give you some money. Here's, such and such dollars. Stu ended up deciding to go to England anyway. But that was like he's like the poster child for this, right? Now there's a lot of factors that go into why a player is making $40,000 a year on paper on this list, because not all of these guys are making exactly what it says. Again, take these numbers with a grain of salt. We got the Champions League draw for the semifinals yesterday. And the talking point coming out of the draw is, yeah, you get Real Madrid and Bayern Munich, whatever. Whatever. Bayern Munich and Real Madrid. Who? No, of course, it's a massive, massive clash there. But the story really is about Thibaut Courtois, the goalkeeper currently at Atletico. Wow. Don't say at and Atletico together back to back. Currently there, playing with Atletico Madrid, helping them get to this point, helping them lead La Liga, helping them get to the Champions League semifinals. He's on loan from Chelsea. So is he going to get to play against Chelsea in the semis? And in order to have him available, is Atletico Madrid going to have to pay Chelsea something on order of millions of pounds? Because that seems ridiculous. Now, these are standard. Loan agreements are fairly standard in that you don't play against your parent club. You're held out. It happens. You can't play against a team that they don't want you to beat them, essentially. And I get it. Now, again, this is pretty standard stuff. It happens all over the place. But for some reason, the stage, the Champions League semifinals, the fact that Atletico Madrid can't justify whatever the fee is. Now, if this was another gigantic club, if this was Barcelona or Real Madrid, they might pay it. They might say, you know what? We want Courtois in goal for this series. We need to go ahead and pay this, whatever it is. It's the cost of doing business. Atletico Madrid doesn't have that kind of scratch lying around. They don't have the ability to just say, you know what? Let's just go ahead and pay it, whatever. And I'm still confused. And I've been asking around this morning. I put it out on Twitter. Can he play? Can he play? What's the deal? Well, they said he can play, but it may require the payment. Here, I've got a UEFA statement. Thanks to my man Madison Soccer on Twitter, giving me the UEFA statement, which I should have looked up, and I might have missed this. Both the UEFA Champions League and the UEFA disciplinary regulations contain clear provisions which strictly forbid any club to exert or attempt to exert any influence whatsoever over the players that another club may or may not field in a match. It follows that any provision in a private contract between clubs which might function in such a way as to influence who a club fields in a match is null, void, and unenforceable so far as UEFA is concerned. Now, the issue here, and this is what we'll talk about later on, because we've got to get out of here to get Musa Okwonga on the air. Does Atletico Madrid press the issue? Because they may end up wanting to do business with Chelsea. You sour that relationship, that could be a damaging thing. All right, first break of the Friday. Musa Okwonga will join us when we come back. We'll talk Manchester United, David Moyes, Wayne Rooney, the whole thing. Don't go anywhere. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV, soccermorning.com. Way down how we build our breakfast down and say my love, love, love.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
Back on Soccer Morning, joined now on the phone by one of my favorite guests, Musa Okwonga. He writes about Manchester United among the many things that he does. You can follow him on Twitter at Okwonga. Hi, Musa. How are you, sir?
Hey, very well, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm well as well. Manchester United, which is why you join us to talk about your club, Manchester United, out of the Champions League. No surprise that they are out of the Champions League at this point. In fact, I suppose in some way you could sort of spin it as a positive. They reached the quarterfinals in a trying year. This was something to build upon. And yet, sort of coming out of the match in Munich, there are some more questions. And David Moyes is once again being dragged through the coals here as people look for his mistakes.
Yeah, I think it's funny with the Bayern defeat. I don't think it's fundamentally affected his long-term future at the club in a funny kind of way, simply because I think he was just not expected to win that tie. And fun enough as well, I don't know if the quarterfinals were necessarily that much of a positive there. I suppose they're par for the course given,
right.
United had a fairly easy group and then Olympiacos in the second round. It's almost par for the course, really. But no, I don't think this has necessarily affected his future, this defeat.
No, sir. It seems as whatever's going to happen is going to happen, irrespective of the Champions League run. And you're right. I mean, certainly Manchester United's expectations are to go all the way. I mean, and if you're going to lose, I mean, at least let it be in the final. Or I suppose that I guess because it was Bayern Munich in the draw, that is really the thing that sort of saves Moyes. But then again, we're getting to the question of, was he too negative in his tactics? And they pull a result at Old Trafford and they go to Munich with a chance. And for a little while there, and let's talk some Patrice Evra, it looked like it had a chance to happen. But the narrative is they woke the beast. Is that how you saw that match?
I think I don't know if they woke the beast. I think the beast was always alive. But I think the slight loss in concentration, the euphoria after the goal, maybe gave Bayern a scent of blood in the water, because the defending was a little bit looser after that goal. They scored the 3 goals in 17 minutes, and those two facts can't be unconnected. The fact that they scored and then the 3 goals came so quickly, and the defensive cover was lacking. And I think that actually, United have been, let's not forget, they've been defending for most of that tie, and psychologically they might have been dreading that result anyway. So I think the goal was almost a cathartic moment, and when Bayern saw that slight weakness, they just plunged in. I think it was that. Is
it odd as a United fan to hear the commentators say things like, in a positive way, as a compliment, that Manchester United is very organized today, things like that? Is that an odd experience for you?
It's not that odd, only because United have put performances on like that before. They played like that against Bayern in 2008. Over 2 legs when Messi was extremely dangerous. They've done this before, actually. They've played very defensively. I think the problem with Moyes on a more broad basis tactically this year is that he seems to have stumbled upon his best formations. If you look at someone like Brendan Rodgers at Liverpool, I know people hate to draw the comparison, but Rodgers is very proactive. The tactical steps that he makes are innovative. Whereas if you look at one of the best things that's happened this year, which is Mata playing with Kagawa, that happened really by accident. It's not something that Moyes proactively said, I'm going to try that. He kind of did it because injuries forced his hand. That's the concern. My concern going forward is, does he have the tactical chops to manage this club past the best teams? And I'm not convinced that he does.
There was also much discussion about Wayne Rooney and his place in that lineup, and whether or not he should have played. And I see today perhaps he is out for a long stretch. I'll get to that in a second. But if Wayne Rooney is injured, and Wayne Rooney says, I want to play, what does David Moyes what does he do in that situation? I've heard suggestions that he picked himself.
Players should never be picking themselves. I'm not sure. There's talk about Rooney running the team, and I don't know how much stock I put by that, to be honest, but I think that, players, I think there's 2 issues here. Firstly, players shouldn't be insisting on playing, or, they shouldn't be allowed to do that. I don't think that necessarily happened. I think that Moyes played Rooney because he has a talismanic value. And I think that Bayern would be afraid of having him on the pitch because of what he represents. But I think the moment that he realised that the Rooney fitness things weren't going to work, they should have taken him off after half an hour and maybe just swapped, put Welbeck up top and brought on Januzaj, and then had a really, because actually I think everything else he chose in that formation was right. I think he was right to choose, Kaggle as the number 10 behind, sort of behind Rooney and Welbeck coming in. That was the right choice, I think. It's completely right. And let's not forget as well, let's not forget United took the lead.
Yes.
They took the lead with Rooney on the pitch. So
yes.
Moyes, we have to give him credit for that. We absolutely have to give him credit for that. The real problem, I have to say, I just wish there had been a player who had grabbed the ball after Evra had scored and said to everyone, just calm down. Like, where was that player? Where was that player in the United team saying, look, guys, just relax? There was no one doing that. That's the thing. There was no on-pitch leadership at that moment.
Right, and in that situation, you would hope that Wayne Rooney steps into that role. Is it possible though that Moyes picked Rooney, whether it was because Rooney picked himself? Again, I'm sort of with you. I'm not sure that that's the case, but is it possible that he picked Rooney out of fear of being, if it all went wrong, or if they were certainly underdogs in the match, but if it all went wrong, then he's the manager who didn't win, who failed in Munich without his best player on the field.
I'm actually going to give Moyes some credit there and say that I think that he played Rooney because he knew they wouldn't want to see him on the team sheet from the start.
Okay.
I think that was partly it. You had Dante talking about Rooney being a danger before the game. And I don't think that Dante was trying to psych Rooney out. I think he genuinely meant that. And actually, if you look at Rooney on the pitch alongside Welbeck too. Welbeck was a real danger. Welbeck's pace. I think actually he was the real threat to Bayern in many ways. And if he'd been the out-and-out striker, Welbeck, from the start, he wouldn't have the same danger because he wouldn't have been coming from deep and making those runs that surge at the heart of the defence. And if you saw the Bayern defence in the first half, they were really sitting deep. Mm-hmm. And that was Welbeck's work. So I think the tactical plan, funnily enough, I think it was almost right, almost just about right.
With the available options, I can certainly see what you're saying. And again, there's a fine line between sort of the psychological edge that Wayne Rooney on the field provides versus his ineffectiveness, depending on his fitness level. And as you said, if it wasn't working, if they weren't sure, if it didn't look like he was effective in any manner, then in his normal manner, then he should have been pulled after half an hour.
That's what I think. Absolutely. Yeah. He should have gone. Yeah.
Now, the report today that I'm seeing that he could, Wayne Rooney, this injury could potentially keep him out for some time. Does, what kind of impact does that have on the rest of the season? There's very few games left, but, Manchester United still has the potential to either play spoiler or really make a run at this.
I think that it doesn't affect things too badly because without Rooney on the pitch, who do you have? You've got Van Persie who's still out, so you're likely to have Javier Hernandez up top, supported by the playmakers Mata, Kagwa and Januzaj. That's actually a very, very, very good team. That's a very good team. Like that attack, that front four should cause trouble. You have one of the best goal scorers in Mexico's history and three of the best playmakers, young or otherwise, pretty much anywhere in Europe. Like these are fantastic players. So this injury does not put Moyes in trouble. And there's the wider conversation of whether Rooney should have been given a 5-year contract of £300,000 a week, which I think that is, I have to say it, that is to me the single worst decision that was made during David Moyes' tenure. That is twice as bad as the contract that was given, I think, to Kobe Bryant. It's got elements of the Steve Nash contract about it as well the last 2 years, because I have to say if Rooney maintains injury and maintains inconsistency, then it's going to look like a very bad investment down the line.
There are about 15 baseball contracts I could bring up, Musa, that are in that same area, but I won't bore you.
Goodness, Pujols.
Yeah, Pujols, even going back farther, baseball fans will know Albert Bell and Bobby Bonilla and going.
The one they've just given as well, the $300,000. Who's that one they've just given to? No, it's Cabrera.
Yes, yes.
My goodness.
Yes.
Well, that's going to that looks bad already. Anyway, let's not get into that.
Well, he's the best hitter in baseball, but yes, there is that. I'm looking at the run in here. Everton, Hull City, obviously not being played. Hull is still in the FA Cup. Everton, Norwich, Sunderland, Hull, and I is that the rescheduled match there at the end of May or this first week of May, or is Hull on the schedule twice? I'm not sure.
No, Hull is. It might be. Yes, it's rescheduled. I think it's rescheduled.
Okay. And then Southampton. That is not an overwhelmingly difficult last set of games, Musa. But again, I guess
it wouldn't have been last year. But
well, okay. So, of course, it's relative based on how United has played this season. But my point is there is a chance here, and yes, it is. It is poor solace, but there is a chance here to sort of build some momentum to head into head into the summer and everything that's going to be happening in the summer with some sort of positivity around the team. Hell, they just sold out 100,000 seat stadium in the United States with Real Madrid for a friendly.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
You're completely. Here's the thing, and it's all about positivity. You're completely right. There is so much room for that. It's time to. These last 5 games, they should just get those 3, Mata, Kagawa, and Januzaj working in tandem. That should just be the aim. Just have those playmakers go out and do their thing. Because frankly, there's not too much to play for. There's the Europa League, and they can get into that. And there's also pride. Like this is. Let's not forget, this is what Man U were playing for against Bayern. They were playing for pride against Man U, which actually asks the further question: why were these players not playing for pride the entire season?
Yes.
Because frankly, if you can do that well against Bayern Munich over 2 legs, if you can lead Bayern Munich after 1.5 legs of a Champions League quarterfinal, then you should be higher than 7th in the league table. Yeah. That to me is the vital question here. And players can actually shift the blame and say Moyes this, Moyes that, but ultimately as well, you're professionals. You've got to be putting on a better showing than that.
Yeah, that trio that you mentioned, Kagawa, Mata, and Januzaj. Obviously, I don't think Januzaj is going anywhere, but there are going to be questions about Kagawa's future. And Mata is a new arrival. You would expect him to sort of stick it out and not force a move anytime soon, but you still have to find a way to make all of them buy into whatever the plan will be. And I suppose that that Moyes' status will hang over everybody's head. Is there anything that United can do to sort of squash any fears that either, well, fears is an interesting word here, but to squash any question over Moyes' status, because he's got the contract. But we all know that clubs often say, well, he's not going anywhere, and then end up firing a manager anyway.
It's a funny one. I mean, players like Mata is a professional. They're all professionals, and they don't. Mata is someone actually, funny enough, who's come to the club, and he may not have always been his best, but he's always been putting in the effort, and now he's starting to score the goals. And that was always going to happen eventually. Kagawa as well has put in a really good shift. He looked great actually, in periods against Bayern when we actually had possession. He looked really useful there. And I think guys like that players just want to play regularly and they want to win trophies. And Kagawa is currently in a position where he's not playing regularly, and the club doesn't like it to be winning trophies anytime soon. Like, that's not a very appealing pitch to him. And you have to say, if someone else comes back in for him, someone like Klopp, then you can't see him hanging around. Like, you wouldn't advise him to him. He's had 2 in different years. Would he risk a 3rd? I don't see why he should. And if he does leave, frankly, good luck to him. My wider concern is that they might be there's talk of giving Moyes £150 million to spend this summer. Mm-hmm. Now, the concern is this. It's not just that United are offering Europa League football, because actually I think players would come to the club if they saw the potential for progress. Mm-hmm. My concern is David Moyes spending £150 million is very different to Jurgen Klopp spending £150 million, because those players, there are certain players who are like, well, why would I go to that club to be coached by someone like that when other managers want to coach me?
Yes.
Players do move where managers are. If Mourinho is going to coach you at Chelsea and he spends money on you, you're more likely to go than if Moyes is going to coach you. It's totally logical. Like, it's like applying to universities. It's like going to, I don't know, Harvard or Stanford or MIT as opposed to an unnamed junior college.
It's not quite that bad.
It's not. But I didn't want to name anybody. Now you've got a US audience. I don't want to name any college and then incur the wrath of several.
We're so thick with universities and colleges. You're bound to. I wouldn't even worry about it too much. But again, I guess with the last. The stretch run of the season here, and this being the first time in a long time that United has been in this position without much to play for.
Right.
It's going to be an interesting watch in terms of who gets to play, how it affects their confidence or potential sale value. I mean, is Hernandez going to stick around for another season of this?
I can't see him doing that. Like, he's too good to do that. He's too good for it. Like, he should go to, I don't know, a club somewhere in Europe which has a load of young playmakers who just need someone to feed passes to. Maybe, I don't know, Serie A might work. I don't know. You've got like a Fiorentina type situation. You've got like someone like Giuseppe Rossi's done very well there. Players who are kind of poacher type. There are a few clubs I'm sure out there that would take him. Yeah. he's a fantastic goal scorer. And frankly, who would wish it on him? Like a second season like he's had this year, it wouldn't be right.
Just U.S. national team fans, but we're pushing that aside. I do like Chicharito. Musa Okwonga, go follow him on Twitter, OKWONGA. He is fantastic, and he writes about Manchester United occasionally, which is why he joins us to give us his insight. Excellent as always, Musa. Thank you very much, sir.
Pleasure's mine. Take care. Catch you soon.
There we go.
Cheers. Bye.
Let's take a break. When we come back, Daniel Gordon, director of Hillsborough, the 30 for 30 ESPN documentary on the tragedy at that stadium, will join us to talk about his film, Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. Be right back.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
Back on Soccer Morning, and very happy to have on the phone line with me now Daniel Gordon, director of such films as 9.79, 30 for 30 on the 1988 100-meter championship at the Olympics. More recently, and coming out next week, premiering next week on ESPN on Tuesday, Hillsborough, the film about the 1989 tragedy there at Sheffield Wednesday's stadium. Daniel, how are you, sir?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. You were kind enough to allow me to see the film ahead of its debut on Tuesday night. I was floored by this film. I thought it was fantastic, and particularly the first half hour is some of the most harrowing, engrossing documentary filmmaking I've ever seen, sports or otherwise. And I suppose my first question is, how do you balance out telling the story of the events of that day, April 15th, 1989, versus the rest of the story, which is about uncovering the truth about Hillsborough?
Yeah, I mean, it is an incredibly powerful film and powerful story. And yeah, you're right. I mean, the first half hour, it sort of begins with the day of the tragedy and just, innocent fans going off to a game in a, beautiful spring day. They travel from Liverpool about 75 miles across to Sheffield. And they're expecting, it's an FA Cup semi-final. It's an amazing, the day should be an amazing day. And it turns into tragedy. And my thought on it, I know that the story's not that well known in the US, but in the UK, I mean, everyone knows about Hillsborough, but also everyone comes to it with a particular belief about what they think they know about Hillsborough. And what I felt was that there had not yet been a definitive account of the story as a whole, from the day right through to today. I mean, only, a week and a half ago, new inquests into the deaths began in the UK. So the story's still very, very live in the UK. And And I just felt that the whole story needed telling, because people don't really know the full picture.
Did you hesitate at all to take this story on? And sort of, just to throw in a relevant fact, you are yourself a Sheffield Wednesday fan, so Hillsborough has a very special meaning to you. Did this?
Yeah.
Did you hesitate at all?
No. I've always wanted to make a Hillsborough film. I wrote a book when I was very, very young. Back in '95, I wrote a book on Sheffield Wednesday on the recent history, and part of that was a chapter on Hillsborough. And it's a very, very difficult, very painful chapter in my club's history. And but I think as fans and of Sheffield Wednesday, we need to recognise this tragedy happened at our ground. And I was determined to tell the story from all people's perspective, whether they were fans, whether they were bereaved families, survivors of the crush, policemen, and again, the significance of the policeman's presence in this film, can't be underestimated, because it's the first time that anything like this level of contribution has been made by policemen who served on the day at Hillsborough.
Yeah, certainly, that very powerful words from the policemen who were there, who dealt with the tragedy, who attempted to save lives as sort of chaos is swirling around them. Something I definitely took out of it. Now, one of the questions I had many people ask me, and most of them Brits, was about the interaction you had with the family, with the committees and the groups the support groups that have been formed to help the families, not only just about uncovering the truth again, and we'll get to Phil Scraton's contribution in a moment, but in terms of sort of keeping the legacy of these people alive. How important was that element of the film?
I mean, I felt that the families have been quite unbelievable in their dignity and how they've conducted themselves over the years in the face of hostility, from the press, from the police, from the public at times, and certainly from authority in the establishment, who wanted to sweep this under the carpet, blame it on the fans. It was very convenient. Blame it on drink, blame it on ticket lists, blame it on late arrivals, all of which had actually been discounted by the first government inquiry into the disaster. But over the years, those stories sort of took hold, and I felt it was absolutely key to get families on board, but also families who had never spoken publicly about it. So this is the first time for them, and for me to approach that's very, very difficult, because to anyone who has lost, who's been bereaved in it, it's a terrible, terrible situation, but to have it in the public eye, and have everyone have an opinion on the death of your loved one, I just don't think you can underestimate the impact that has. And the people that we interview, they've been suffering with this for 25 years. It breaks up families, it breaks up relationships, it takes over people's lives. But I just felt that their voices needed to be heard with the dignity that they do show in the film.
I think the one of the most powerful things about the film is the level of detail. I mean, it's the small things that the families went through, and also to kind of rewind all the way back to the beginning of the film and the events as they unfolded there at Hillsborough. Just the small decisions that were made that impacted everything that happened. Is that, as an American, I'm familiar with Hillsborough and know the story, but certainly don't know all of these things. Is that something that is going to be new when this film can be shown in the UK to a UK audience?
Yeah, I mean, the general UK audience, an awful lot of the film will be new. People who've studied, Hillsborough in detail, it's great to have everything all there in one comprehensive account. But those details, a lot of people, I've sort of shown the film privately just to get some feedback, and a lot of people are blown away and I never knew that, I didn't realize, all those kind of things. And it does show, that this was it was an accident waiting to happen, but it was also a perfect storm of events. And I've looked at the footage, and there's CCTV footage of the day, and I've looked at that in detail, and you just sort of see how just one decision led to another, or indecision actually led to a worsening situation, and with disastrous consequences.
Now, this is part of 30 for 30 Soccer Stories series. Obviously, ESPN are behind the film and behind your work. Were you conscious of the American audience throughout the making of the film, or did you want to divorce that from how you went about presenting Hillsborough?
I divorced it, actually. I wanted to make the film. The great thing about ESPN and the 30 for 30, certainly from my point of view as a filmmaker, is that it's very director-driven. And so they kind of said, look, we want to make a film about Hillsborough. We think you're the right person to do it, so go and make your film. And when we presented early cuts, and they were kind of like, an American audience might not understand this detail or that detail, so can we make it clearer? And this film is without a narrator, so it's not like you have that option of just, I'll change the script. So in that respect, there's little nods to an American audience, but actually, this is a film that ought to be shown worldwide, and people can come to it with no knowledge, and sort of maybe go away and try and find out more. But no, I mean, I was kind of, there's the obvious thing, in the UK, I was 16 years old at the time. I'm the same age as an awful lot of people who died on that day, and we went to our soccer games and soccer grounds and stood, and the concept of standing room only is so foreign to an American audience, but it was just so normal to us. That's what you did. If you were a fan, you went behind the goal, and you packed yourself in that kind of area. So those kind of things maybe need to explain, to American audience. But apart from that, I think, you can take from it, wherever you are in the world.
I do think, and what it evoked for me is memory of concerts that I've attended. Now, they weren't terrorist situations, and it wasn't a sporting event, but I've certainly been in situations where a crowd has swayed, gone the wrong direction, and next thing you know, there's momentum there, and everybody's headed in one direction. And if there's a barrier, I think that's relatable for most people who have ever attended an event with a lot of people gathered into a small space. I wanted to talk about Phil Scraton's role in the process of uncovering so much about what happened on that day, and certainly the cover up and the sort of the institutional failings of the police and the government. How important, in the watching of the film, he jumps off the screen as sort of this amazingly dedicated, inquisitive individual who made so much of this possible. Are we here 25 years later with you having made this film and the inquest happening again in order to sort of make people accountable for what happened without Phil Scraton?
Yeah, I think he's an absolutely incredible, amazing man. Very, very dedicated. And he's not just dedicated to Hillsborough cause, he does an awful lot of things, institutional abuses, particularly in prisons in the UK as well. But he has been remarkable pretty much from day one. And just in the methodical academic research and the interviews he conducted right at the very, very beginning, going back to 1989, and then uncovering potential leads for a police cover-up in 1996, which then leads to another uncovering in 98. And then, this is all, in the film. And then finally he publishes a book in 1999, which still stands the test of time. And it has been updated, but only in later chapters. If you read that now, you think, my God, this was all available 10 years after the event. It's all there in black and white, and he's uncovered it with documentary evidence. And people didn't listen for whatever reason. People didn't want to listen. And then when the 20th anniversary happened, there's always a memorial service every year. There'll be one this year at Anfield, the home of Liverpool. And it will be attended by 30,000+ people. And, this sort of indignation happened on the 20th anniversary, which then sped up the release of documents. There was a new panel set up, of which Phil Scraton was one of the members and he was lead author of the report. And from then there was a double apology by the British Prime Minister, David Cameron. And that's led to the new inquests and all kinds of things. But it really is that tenacity, and all the people that have argued with Scraton or told him, it wasn't relevant, or, you're barking up the wrong tree or whatever, they're kind of like eating their words now, and he's been proved right. And he's a remarkable ally to the families as well, and they're extremely grateful to him. But he keeps saying, I didn't lose anyone on that day. It's not me that needs, the support is there, but he's been remarkable all the way through.
You talked about some of the beliefs that people bring to the story of Hillsborough, certainly in the UK. And I wonder how difficult it is to break through some of those hardened beliefs. And obviously, the Sun had a major role to play in sort of pushing out a narrative that turned out to be completely made up and wrong-headed. And I suppose that is there a direct thought in your head making this film that you may have already answered this, that you're going to break through those barriers? And really, I guess from your perspective, being an Englishman, being from Sheffield, how many times over the course of your life since Hillsborough have you run into people who are supremely convinced they know exactly what happened?
Oh, I mean, everyone's got an opinion on Hillsborough. For some people outside of the city of Sheffield, that opinion slightly shifted over the last couple of years since the independent panel report came out and exposed the cover-up for what it was. But there are still people that you'll speak to in Sheffield who know what happened. I know what happened. I know what I saw. There's an incredible amount of people I run into who happen to have driven by the ground on that day, which ought to have caused bigger traffic jams than maybe they were on the day. Everyone seems to have been there and have their opinion. And it's I sort of keep thinking, look at the whole picture, go and read the evidence, read the reports, and then you kind of come up with maybe what you saw on the day isn't the same as a whole picture. But I also felt that there was a very human story behind the policemen, that there were an awful lot of senior policemen who really need to question what they did or didn't do on that day, but there was an awful lot of junior policemen who were put in a situation they could never have imagined themselves being put in and have suffered since. And did their absolute best. And I felt that their stories also needed to be told and the effect that it's had on them. Because they've not been part of any of the campaigns and they were sort of institutionally silenced as well. And it's only in recent years as things have started to open up that a few of them have actually either come forward or started to sort of come to terms maybe with what happened and what they went through. And that's, they've had issues with that. And I just felt that their story was valid and needed to be part of the film.
The 30 for 30 Hillsborough debuts Tuesday night, 8 o'clock Eastern on ESPN. We're talking to Daniel Gordon, director of the film. And Daniel, I have to ask you about the decision, and I'm sure it wasn't your decision, but about the decision to debut the film on the 25th anniversary of Hillsborough, and whether or not, obviously this is an American audience that's going to view it for the first time on television, and perhaps for them the connection isn't visceral, but is there any thought you have about that particular timing?
Yeah, I'd rather it wasn't on the anniversary, if it was my decision. I mean, it happens to be that, it's the lead film and the season starts on April the 15th. April the 15th is an extremely somber day for anyone connected with Hillsborough. As I said, there's an annual memorial service. There'll be one here. I mean, the film actually will go out, in theory, on the 16th in the UK. It couldn't be, even if we were able to, for legal reasons, broadcast this in the UK, and we can't for another year until the inquests are over. We couldn't broadcast it on the 15th. It would be deemed a bit insensitive. But I did seek advice from the families, from others, and they were okay with it in terms of an American audience on the 15th. But again, opinions are a bit divided in the UK. The people, the families always have this day of remembrance and memorial service. The Liverpool Football Club refused to play on this day, and that caused fixture problems in the past. But they've just every year we remember our fans, and the players attend the service, the management attends the service, and the fans attend the service. So, and there will be one again, this coming Tuesday. But yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one really, because I'm not sure. I think it's coincidence that it's fallen on that day. But I would rather it. I would rather it was. I'd also rather it was a little bit further down the line. I always get a bit more time with my film.
Well, there you go. Yeah, I've had a couple of expats who I converse with regularly on Twitter who have expressed a similar opinion that it's going to be that day for them particularly wouldn't be a day that they would want to see the film, and it's perfectly understandable. Let me sort of separate you from the making of this film and ask you, as a Wednesday fan, I'm curious about the legacy of that day and the impact it's had on. I mean, when people say Hillsborough now, Daniel, they mean that day, and they mean that event, and they mean those 96 deaths they don't necessarily mean your stadium that I'm sure is beloved with Wednesday fans.
Yeah, and it's something that Wednesday fans really grapple with, and there's a whole range of opinions. I know people that are my age that experienced it on the day, and certainly, people connected with the club that were at the ground for whatever reason on the day, have always felt that we should have torn that stand down and rebuilt it as a fitting memorial to those who died. And now there's even a sort of an undercurrent, I guess, of people who would actually like to move away from the ground. There was a period of time where a lot of fans felt this shouldn't be called the Hillsborough Stadium disaster, it should be called the Liverpool fans disaster, and I just think that's an abominable thought. And I just think it's the problem for Wednesday fans as well is that end, and again, this is a very non-American thing, but that end was always the away end. So it kind of wasn't our end. Our end was at the other end of the ground, so it was only visiting fans that would go into that area. So we don't have an emotional connection with that end. But I think true, genuine Wednesday fans recognise that this is a tragedy that happened at our ground. We need to recognise that, and we need to always honour that memory. And, in an ideal world, we would have rebuilt that stand with a fitting memorial to those who died.
Daniel Gordon, director of Hillsborough, the 30 for 30, the first of the soccer story series that ESPN is doing leading up to the World Cup. The story of April 15th, 1989, the day 96 Liverpool fans lost their lives at Hillsborough. The film is amazing, Daniel. I can't wait to watch it again, as simply because it is such an amazing view into everything that surrounds that story. And as an American, again, my appreciation is very academic. It was until I saw the film, and I want to thank you for making it, first of all, and tell everybody to go watch it on Tuesday night. And if you can't handle it on Tuesday, DVR the thing.
Yes, thank you. I just got chills as you said that down my back. Very appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for joining us, Daniel. Best of luck.
Thank you. Right. You're welcome. Bye-bye.
There goes Daniel Gordon, director of Hillsborough. That, again, I cannot say enough about how amazing that film is. I can't. I mean, I've only seen it once, and I had a limited amount of time to watch it in. I tried to give it all of my attention. I'm normally one of those people that is watching 3 different things. I've got Twitter up. I've got a TV on. I've got a screen in front of me. I'm tracking this. And there's a news story. There's a player traded. There's a player signed. So-and-so got fired. FIFA is corrupt. All of that stuff's happening all the time. It's always happening. And I made sure when I had the opportunity to watch this movie, to watch this film, that I stopped what I was doing, turned everything else off, disconnected myself from Twitter, which is really hard to do. I'll admit I have a problem with Twitter. I have an addiction problem with it. It's very difficult for me to go to more than a couple of minutes without looking at Twitter. And I made myself watch this movie. And again, I think it's kind of tough from an American perspective, again, to have an understanding of Hillsborough as an event, a thing that happened. It's abstract. It was then in 1989. I wasn't aware of it in 1989. I was not even 10 years old at the time. I wasn't aware of it until I was in my mid to late 20s, really, in any specific sense. Again, sort of hearing about it, knowing what it was, knowing that it impacted English football to the core. The reason that all of the stadiums in England are now all-seater stadiums, which is, I think, as an American, for Americans, is, wait, they had stadiums that didn't have seats somewhere? Like, that doesn't occur to us. All of our stadiums have always had seats, or bleachers at the very least. We never did terracing. We never did standing during games. That was never a thing that we had. So you need a full education into exactly the background and what led to this. And if it wasn't, here's the thing about it. If it wasn't Hillsborough, it would have probably been somewhere else. Now, I know that this has been going on for 100 years before the disaster at Hillsborough. But all it takes is just 1, 2, 3 mistakes. And on this day, there were several mistakes. Institutions, public safety mistakes made by, or not made, in the case of the police superintendent, that led to the disaster. Failure to recognize what was happening. Now, and I think that, well, I don't want to build up any straw men here, but I do think that there's an instinct to sort of push it to the side and not make it a non-issue. Yes, 96 people died, solemnly recognize that. Respect those people who lost their lives. Again, as Daniel said, some of those people as young as 16 years old. There were teenagers in that group. Teenagers died. People in the beginning of their lives died because somebody screwed up at Hillsborough. Several people screwed up at Hillsborough. And again, the most powerful thing about, one of the most powerful things, the whole thing's damn powerful. One of the most powerful things about the film is seeing the policemen who were on duty at Hillsborough that day tell their stories, talk about how they recognized something bad was going to happen, and yet nothing happened to fix the problem. And then afterwards, the bulk of the movie is everything that happened afterwards, because that's the story is the 96 people. The tragedy is the 96 people who lost their lives. But the injustice is everything that came afterwards. And all of the people who were trying to cover their own asses, cover the asses of the South Yorkshire police, cover the asses of the West Midlands police, cover the government covering their asses. People wanting to find a simple explanation for it. They were all drunk. That's why it happened. They gate crashed. That's why it happened. If you've ever heard the theory, if you are barely aware of Hillsborough and know a little bit of the story, or think you know the story, and you've heard that Liverpool fans were drunk and they gate crashed, and that's why it happened, you have to watch this movie. You're required to watch this movie. I'm making that a requirement for your soccer education, because whether this is something that happened on a field or not, 6 minutes of that game was played before everybody recognized what was happening. Even though this isn't a game, even though this isn't a moment in soccer history that happened with a goal and a ball and amazing play, this is part of the soccer history that we should be aware of. There's a lot of soccer history we should be aware of that we need to get educated about, and I don't mean to call people out. Some of you have better understanding than I do. Some people have much more knowledge about the history of South American football or Asian football or African football. And again, you can't learn everything. You can't know everything. But anytime you have the opportunity to be educated, you should absolutely be educated. Get educated. Learn something. This movie will help you learn something. Tuesday night, 8 o'clock Eastern, ESPN. I feel like I'm going on and on and on about it. But I'm not going to feel bad about that. I'm just going to shift us. Now, speaking of Liverpool, as I try to deftly turn my way left, this weekend, Liverpool, Manchester City. This is the one for all. This is the heavyweight title fight in the English Premier League. This is everything down to this game. If City wins this game, would you make them the odds-on favorite to win the title in the Premier League? I think so. And Liverpool, 24 years since their last top division title. They've never won a Premier League title. Is this the season they climb that mountain and achieve that? Because they have shown the ability to be devastating. And it's going to be fun. And I wonder, and I put this yesterday to Luke Moore, I wonder if we're going to get a cagey match out of this, despite the fact both these teams know how to score goals. Eddie from Brooklyn's on the line. What's up, Eddie?
Hey, what's going on, Jason? I hate to veer you off of what everyone's talking about being the match of the decade, even though we just saw a Clásico like a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and that was the match of the decade.
Yeah, no, Eddie, come on now. Don't look. Let's not get offended here. Soccer fans got to stop doing this.
I just find it funny every time this comes around. Everything is the match of the decade.
No, I realize that. Yes, I realize that. And Bayern Munich and Real Madrid will be the match of the Champions League tie of the decade. It will be.
Oh yeah, that feels like a Champions League tie. I don't know why, but when the draw came out, I kind of feel like, oh, it's Chelsea, Atletico Madrid. That's cute.
Well, it is interesting that you sort of have the two most fancied teams going at each other and going to knock one of those teams out, while Chelsea, who are good but certainly strivers, and Atletico Madrid, who's been punching above their weight for the entire season, they're going to make the final. One of those teams is going to make the final. You got anything else, Eddie?
Yeah, I want to start this campaign when I think Atletico Madrid are like the Borussia Dortmund of 2014 in terms of this whole Champions League thing. So I see them getting by Chelsea.
Okay.
And I want to start this campaign that when Jose Mourinho gets eliminated from the semifinals again, and people keep living off of his past glory, that he is now the Tom Brady of Champions League coaches.
Really? What does that mean exactly? Because Tom Brady won some Super Bowls, and Jose Mourinho
and Jose Mourinho won some Champions League matches, and he's been thoroughly outcoached in semifinals in how many of the last?
Okay, no, I agree with you, and it is odd that he's had more difficulty with the bigger, richer teams than he did when he won it with Porto in 2004.
Yeah, he won it with Porto. That was like Tom Brady winning it in that 2001 season. He really had no business winning that Super Bowl, but he won it, and then he wins another one. It's like, oh my God, it's Tom Brady. And then, as of late, they don't win it all, and we keep living off of what they did in the past and not what they're doing in the present, i.e. getting thoroughly outcoached by Jurgen Klopp in 2013.
As much as this is going to pain me, Eddie, because he's my quarterback right now, I actually think that you're more I think it's Peyton Manning more than Tom Brady.
Oof.
I really do.
I don't know. I like the Brady analogy more, to be honest, because I think Manning is looked at more as a failure than anything.
Hey, come on.
I mean, and don't get me wrong, I've always been a Manning guy over a Brady guy. I just think, people just really look down on Manning like a failure because he only has the one, and he didn't even play well enough to get it, to be honest. That was the defense that won it.
Absolutely. Well, it was raining that day. As a whole thing. We've talked baseball and football on the show. What the hell's happening? Eddie, I got to let you go.
I have no idea.
I got Kyle McCarthy coming on in just a second. Appreciate the phone call, man.
All right, man.
There it goes. There's Eddie in Brooklyn. Let's take a break. When we come back, Kyle McCarthy from Fox Soccer will join us. We'll talk some MLS and salaries and all of that excellent American stuff. Soccer Morning. North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. Go to soccermorning.com and support the show. Be right back.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
Joining me on the phone now from Fox Soccer, Mr. Kyle McCarthy, Inside MLS, the blog over there at Fox Soccer. Kyle's an excellent follow on Twitter as well. Kyle J. McCarthy. Kyle, how are you, sir?
I'm doing very well, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm looking forward to another wonderful weekend of soccer/football, because it really doesn't matter what you call it, people. Kyle, we're here to talk some MLS, but before I get to games and the potential for Landon Donovan to break Jeff Cunningham's goal-scoring record this weekend, I have to start with the MLS Players Union dropping the salaries on our heads, as they are wont to do twice a year or so. Any conclusions to be drawn from this round of salary information?
I tend not to draw too many rash conclusions. The one thing I always warn about is that these salaries are a rough guide. They're not gospel. They're not an exact detail of how these players fit under the salary budget or where they fit in terms of their own compensation. But one thing I think you can note is the fact that you see a sort of middle class popping up. Guys who are making 175, 200, 225 who have been good performers in this league and who are starting to receive compensation in line with that.
There is that. Now people will do the math, Kyle, and they'll point to, well, the top 7 guys make 31% of all MLS salaries per this report, and the average salary is 100 and whatever it is, but the mean is something different, 90 something I think is the number. Does any of that achieve the goal of what the Players Union releases these numbers for a reason, Kyle? Let's not delude ourselves.
Oh, absolutely. They want to put pressure on MLS to increase its expenditures, and that is pretty striking when you look at the numbers and you see the disparity between the top earners and then everybody else. And when the Players Union is sort of approaching the situation, heading into collective bargaining negotiations, you can bet that that's something that they want to address and a gap that they'd like to close.
The league will point to, this is how much money we're spending on salaries, and they'll say we're losing money still, and we all know that this is rhetoric building up to those CBA negotiations. But I think that salary inequity, that the top earners versus the bottom, and that sort of vast space in between Michael Bradley and some starters who are still making less than $75,000 a year, Kyle, is really what the league needs to address. And in that way, we should sort of ignore the bottom line numbers. The LA Galaxy are spending $13 million on salaries, Kyle, but 3 guys make 10 point something million dollars.
Yeah, it's weird. It definitely is, and it's the sort of thing that can have an influence in the locker room at certain points. I think it was Herculez Gomez yesterday who tweeted about how it was sort of an awkward day for everyone because you had a chance to look and see what the guys around you were making. And there's some truth to that for sure. There's a lot to digest for these players, and you can see sort of the competing principles because when you look at the MLS Players Union, they want higher wages for everyone. They want to bring the bottom up, but they want to keep the top high. For MLS, with the disparity between the top earners and the bottom earners, you can see that the league thinks it gets the most bang for its bucks at the top end. They're willing to overspend to bring guys like Clint Dempsey and Michael Bradley back to the league, and to have guys like Jermaine Defoe and Robbie Keane in it. So those sort of philosophical tensions will be something that both sides will have to sort of investigate as these collective bargaining negotiations ramp up.
Yeah, it's an interesting philosophical question. Do you want a league that is more fairly balanced in terms of salaries? Is that a better league than a league that's got guys making $6 million like Dempsey and Bradley? It's kind of a difficult question and difficult to prove either way. All right, let's talk about the schedule of games that we have this weekend, Kyle. I'm looking at these games. Philly, RSL, Toronto, Colorado. Certainly a chance for Toronto to win a game at home. They've never lost to Colorado there, and yet Michael Bradley may miss this game. Any concerns? Is that something that Toronto should be worried about for a longer term, or is this just, hey, let's be careful with our multi-million-dollar star?
I think prudence is the best course of action for Toronto FC and Michael Bradley right now. Bradley has logged a lot of minutes. He's logged a lot of responsibility since he's returned to MLS. And if he's not 100% fit, then it would make sense to sort of tap the brakes a little bit and perhaps sit him down this weekend. Because when you look at it, Toronto FC is ahead of schedule right now with the sort of results they've been able to put together. The fact that they were able to win in Columbus. If Michael Bradley misses this game, it's obviously a blow for Toronto FC, but it's not necessarily a bad thing at this juncture of the season.
Do you think it tells us more about Toronto FC if they have Bradley and Defoe and Cesar and all of these stars on the pitch and go beat a team like LA, or let's say they had beaten RSL or one of the top teams in the league? Or does it tell us more about their eventual end point without Michael Bradley and Jermaine Defoe, because they're going to have to go through stretches without at least one of those guys?
It was an important victory for TFC with the squad that they had last weekend, because the trajectory of this team is reliant on its depth. You look at Bradley, you look at Defoe, you look at Julio Cesar, you know those guys are going to show up, and you know they're going to help the team win a certain amount of games. But you have to rely on players 12 through 18 to help you through a 34-game season. And with the way Toronto FC plays, that 4-4-2, where they like to sit back and break on the counter, you're always going to be in games. So if the Reds can get consistent performances from players a little bit further down the roster, then they'll be in good stead this season.
Let me turn to Montreal, Chicago. This is the first game that Jack McInerney will suit up for the Montreal Impact after being traded for Andy Wenger. First, let me get your thoughts on that trade. A lot of people immediately jumped to the conclusion that Montreal won that trade. Jack Mac's a talent. What the heck are they doing in Philadelphia? I'm not so sure that's the case.
It's a better fit for both players. Wenger should slide into the center forward role in Philadelphia. Maybe not as a starter, but as a guy who sees some minutes. And it's a better fit for his skill set than the over-the-top sort of style that Montreal likes to play, slotting DeVio through the line. But for McInerney, I think it's a great move because Montreal plays a sort of style that should fit his qualities very well. They know how to supply a guy who's able to get in behind the line and is able to work himself into good areas to finish off moves. So I think for both players, it's a good move in terms of finding better fits for how they like to play the game.
Well, I'm going to turn to Dallas now, hosting Seattle at Toyota Stadium. Dallas has started out gangbusters so far. Now, they did this last year as well, Kyle, and eventually they just dropped straight off the table. Injuries are a part of that, but in the end, it ultimately led to Shellis Hyman leaving that club, and maybe that was a factor, maybe it wasn't. They've got a different head coach now in Oscar Breja. They're starting hot. Do we believe in Dallas yet? Do they need to beat a Seattle, even if it's at home, to prove their credentials again?
Yes. FC Dallas has looked great at the start of this year. Mauro Diaz has been fantastic. Oscar Breja has done a great job. But FC Dallas does not have the best of track records when it comes to maintaining these hot starts. So every result for them matters. Every point matters. And playing against a Seattle team that always poses a threat is difficult. So FCD needs to continue to string together those results, and it would be important for them to get another one against Sounders FC this weekend.
And they got a red-hot Clint Dempsey coming off his hat trick in Portland. If I'm not mistaken, Jimmy Traore will come back for Seattle after his red card suspension. So it'll be a challenge for Dallas, and they can prove something here. It'll probably end up being a draw, and we'll have no conclusions, Kyle. But I suppose that from a Seattle perspective, you know, they're okay so far. It's not a terrible start by any stretch, but they want to see some serious momentum, especially before they end up losing. They're on Brad Evans right now. Well, I don't know if his prognosis will lead him to be in the World Cup squad or not, but they're going to miss some guys during that World Cup period. They need to rack up as many points as they can.
They do need as many points as they can, and they need to sort out their defensive issues. It gets sort of lost in the shuffle with that 4-4 draw and how exciting it was between Seattle and Portland last weekend. But the defensive work in that game was poor across the board. And Seattle is the sort of team that has been prone to defensive mistakes. It's not an organization issue. It's an individual players making individual mistakes sort of issue. And Sabres FC simply can't have it because they're the sort of side that wants to lift MLS Cup at the end of the year. So this game is a good test for them because FC Dallas will put pressure on them in the right areas and stress the need to avoid those mistakes. And Seattle has to start cutting them out if they want to get to where they're going.
You know, that Cascadia game last week, Portland and Seattle, was interesting from a Timbers perspective. They still haven't won. That game was an opportunity to get their first win over their most hated rival at home in front of their fans, and ultimately it didn't happen. Seattle came back. So there's good in the fact they scored some goals and shown some progress, but there's the bad of losing control of that game. They're hosting Chivas USA, and you would sort of pencil in first win of the year for the Timbers, but I don't want to jump to that conclusion. If they don't get a win here, what happens?
Well, they will win.
Okay, fair enough.
I think they will win. Chivas USA was terrible last weekend. They just were not even at the races against LA Galaxy, and Portland for me looked better last week. And because they were able to use the width a little bit more, Darlington Nagbe stayed a little bit wider on the left to get a run at DeAndre Yedlin. And that gave Diego Valeri a little bit more space. And spacing is important for the Timbers because they have a lot of creative players. They have a lot of guys who want to be on the ball in the transition from the middle third to the final third. So if they can get that spacing right as they did last weekend, they're going to pose a significant threat to Chivas USA. And it is important for them to get off the market and get that first win because it has been a somewhat difficult start to the season for the Timbers.
More desperate for their first win, the Timbers or the defending Supporter Shield winner, New York Red Bulls, who travel to D.C. this weekend?
Equally desperate,
okay.
I would say. New York has sort of stumbled out of the gate. It hasn't been a particularly assured start. Mike Petke has made his usual noises about wanting to see improvement, and it's justified. The Red Bulls will get it right. This is a good team. They've got all the pieces they need, but it hasn't been a great start. And this is a tricky game against the DC United team that won against New England at home last weekend, and it's starting to find its footing a little bit. So the Red Bulls will need to put together a performance to get that first victory of the season. You
mentioned New England. 1 win in 5, 4 points, a -6 goal differential. This is a team that was getting a lot of heat before the year started, Kyle, and I know you've seen them up close and personal. Is there something fundamentally wrong right now, or is this all fixable?
It's all fixable. They need to sort of develop the chemistry that they had last year. The loss of Juan Agudelo was a big blow for them, and Teal Bunbury is doing his best, but it takes a little bit of time to find your way in that system and link the play appropriately. They've also had some injury concerns. Lee Wynn's missed some time, Kellen Rose missed some time, and those two guys are much better when they're in tandem than when they're separated. So I think the Reds will get it right. Will they get it right this weekend at home against Houston? It could happen because the Dynamo will have some selection questions. Brad Davis is doubtful for the game, and there are issues in central defense with David Horst being ruled out through suspension, and Eric Bruner undergoing surgery this week.
Depth questions there will be an issue for Houston. All right, let me turn to Landon Donovan, LA Galaxy playing the Vancouver Whitecaps, and Donovan tied with Jeff Cunningham for the all-time record for MLS goals. This is sort of, it's a foregone conclusion that he'll break the record. It is in terms of sort of putting Donovan in perspective. Again, there's always this questions about whether he should have stayed in Europe or he would have been a better player had he played in Europe for a longer period of time. But is there any real way to sort of see MLS where it is without Landon Donovan having been a fixture for the last decade plus?
No, absolutely not. He is one of the two most important players ever to play in this league alongside David Beckham. He has been a fixture. He has been an important piece of this league's growth over the past decade or so, and it's proven in the results. He is a goal scorer. He is a player who has been able to make a consistent impact during the regular season and during the postseason for the Galaxy. And his contribution to the league cannot be understated.
Do you get the feeling we're seeing, maybe not this year, and he's certainly not setting anything directly, but do you get the feeling we're seeing things wind down for him? He might have, considering his fitness and his age, he might have a couple more seasons on a normal track, but this is a guy that's had questions about commitment.
It all boils down to whether he's enjoying the game.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that in the past, and I'm sure he'll continue to say it in the future. Does it mean that he'll wind it down at some point in the next couple of years? I don't know. You really can never tell with Landon Donovan because he's his own man. He's not going to let the conventions of a typical soccer career dictate whether he stays or goes. He's got a very lucrative contract that he can certainly play out if he'd like to. So you hope not. You want to see Landon Donovan play for as long as you can because he's been an important part of the league. He's been an important part of the Galaxy, an important part of the U.S. national team. And to lose him before his time would be a blow for sure.
His next goal will be his 135th MLS goal, taking him past Jeff Cunningham, who he is tied with right now. Now, the assist record is also 135. It's held by Steve Ralston, and Landon is 16 away from tying that record. He needs to at least stay in the league until he can get 16 more assists. Let's just say it that way, right?
Yeah, you would think so. And how incredible is that assist record from Steve Ralston,
Insane.
by the way?
Insane.
Not one of those ones that people talk about, but he's been way out in front for a while now.
Yeah.
It just speaks volumes about how consistent he was over the course of his career.
Yeah, I imagine there's a whole generation of MLS fans who don't know a damn thing about Steve Ralston, Kyle, and that's a shame. Go learn about Steve Ralston and how good he was in this league for a very long time. Kyle McCarthy from Fox Soccer. Please read Inside MLS and follow Kyle on Twitter, Kyle J. McCarthy. Kyle, appreciate your time, man. Thanks a lot.
Well, thanks for having me, Jason.
All right, talk to you soon. There goes Kyle. Phone lines are open, 347-756-6276. Down the stretch of a show on Friday. It's been good already. And now you get to make your direct contribution. Eddie from Brooklyn's called in. He wanted to talk about the game of the century. Now, look, I say it in a sarcastic sort of, I know that it's not the game of the century. I mean, the game of the century was Portland and Seattle last weekend, right? In terms of the result and what happened and what we got out of that game. Now, I mean, come on. It's hyperbole, and we always use hyperbole. And hyperbole has lost all meaning in the modern world. Everything is awesome. Everything is amazing. Everything is the best in the history of the world. Again, we use it ironically now, and maybe it's kind of sad from a language perspective that everything's the game of the century. But come on, Liverpool and Manchester City, with all to play for and a potential Premier League title on the line. Remember, City won their first title in something like 1,000 decades a couple years back. Now Liverpool's trying to break through their first Premier League title, their first top division title in 24 years. To have that happen now in this season with everything that's been going on and after the questions over Luis Suarez and whether he would stick around, I think it would be a fantastic story. I'm no particular affinity for Liverpool necessarily. I'm rooting for the story. I'm rooting for something interesting to happen. If Manchester City wins, is that really interesting? Is it really interesting? I mean, they got theirs. No offense, City fans. And I'm like a lot of sports fans, because I don't think this is just a soccer thing. I'm like a lot of sports fans in that I have a reaction to the notion you can just buy your championship. Now, City's got a City way about them, and they're trying to play some nice soccer. There's all of that. All of these things are things to be considered. But they spent a ton of money. Now they're going to go start a team in New York and maybe spend a ton of money there. But MLS rules prevent them from doing so. 631, you're on the air.
Hey, Jason, how you doing? It's Bill from Brooklyn.
Hey, Bill, what's up, man?
Hey, listen, I just want to say I've been happy to support the show, and you should really get on all of the Red Bulls fans to give a little extra to Soccer Morning, because all of us who bought extra tickets for the Arsenal friendly are getting paid, man. The secondary market is the best thing that ever happened to us.
Oh yeah, tell me.
Supporter Shield is like second now next to the secondary markets for Red Bull fans who are selling the Arsenal pick.
Yeah. Tell me, Bill. I mean, I don't know if you have any reason not to say what kind of cash you're clearing here, but yeah, this is an interesting story. Red Bull's hosting Arsenal in a friendly. Season ticket holders. How many tickets were you able to get yourself? Because if you're a season ticket holder.
They sent us an email saying that due to high demand, they were going to put a limit of 50.
50?
Which is not a limit. It was almost as if they were just giving us a license to print money.
50?
And some of us did, and some of us are very happy with the result.
That's an amazing kind of gift. Here, from the front office of the New York Red Bulls, here, season ticket holders, you come out to our stadium and make that difficult trek every time out. Here's 50 tickets to a game. 50 tickets you could sell at how much beyond face value?
I mean, if the IRS is listening, I'm not going to say anything.
Okay.
So.
All right. I just imagine that there's some guy out there who might have some of them. And I'm just curious if, we're talking, 200, 300, 400% markup. I don't know. I'm just,
I mean, the markups are definitely going up because I think today was the general on sale, and pretty much I imagine they've sold out of those. So now the only way that you could get your hands on them is through the secondary market, and as a result, supply and demand, the supply is low, so demand is high.
Hey man, you gotta love as much stick as I'll give them. You've got to love the American fans of the English teams who make that commitment, and I already mentioned it. The big house, Michigan Stadium, sold out for a Real Madrid-Manchester United friendly in like a day. 100,000 seats in that building. That's insane. Bill, you got anything else, man?
No, I just want to say I love the show and happy to support it.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Thanks a lot. 661, you're on the air.
Hey, Jason. My name's Cody. I'm from Bakersfield. I had a question about the loan system. You were talking about that a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
There's been some news about Everton and Atletico. Do you feel that there's a fundamental difference between buying players and loaning them to other clubs? So you're in a sense hoarding players and not having to pay the full expense compared to what Galaxy and Portland are trying to do, in that they're fielding an entirely separate team? Because I feel that's the same thing. You're gathering more players and restricting other clubs from using them.
Yeah, I imagine there's some of that. There's some of you're hurting your rivals by taking players off the market if you bring them in and then loan them out. I don't have any real deep-seated feelings about the loan system as it exists. It's just a thing that happens in soccer. It's never really bothered me either way. But I can see, I'm one of those people who will reject out of hand the notion that Everton are cheating somehow. I think that's ridiculous. They're using the system.
Yeah, I wouldn't agree that they're cheating either.
Yeah, I mean, look, they've used that system, the loan system, to their advantage. And you have to give Everton and Roberto Martinez credit for finding the right players to accentuate their team and make them better. Not everybody does that right. Some teams, especially mid-table teams, will take a guy on loan from United or Chelsea or Spurs or Arsenal, whoever, and it doesn't add anything to their team. It's just a guy taking up a spot. And you have to wonder about the teams that are taking loanees, because in a lot of cases, I suppose that this is an argument against the loan system in a lot of ways. Sometimes you have players on loan who are blocking other players from coming up to the youth system or getting a shot at a club, and that's going to stunt their growth. And that's a decision that those clubs taking players on loan has to make. And I can't imagine it's easy.
Yeah, I definitely think it's better for the players. Just because if a club's going to buy a player just so another team doesn't have it, and that's only to the detriment of the player, at least loaning them out or having a second team is going to help them develop. So
yeah,
I just want to know your thoughts on that.
It's just, again, I haven't really, thanks for the comment. I haven't really established an opinion on the loan system in some kind of grand sense. I just, it's just the thing. This is the way of the world. This is what happens. And I really don't have a problem with any clauses that say you can't play against your parent club. Now, UEFA is saying that they won't recognize a ban on Courtois playing for against Chelsea. Fine, we'll see if Atletico really pushes that issue. Again, they may want to maintain a good relationship with Chelsea. And if Chelsea says, we don't want him playing against us, and yeah, that gives Chelsea an unfair advantage in the Champions League semifinals. But I guess you can go all the way back and say if Atletico Madrid thought they might be good enough to reach this point, then they should have found a different goalkeeper, somebody that's going to help them. I mean, or purchase Courtois outright. Good calls. Gives me only a couple minutes to touch on a couple of interesting stories. Report at BN Sports website says that the Copa America Centenario 100th anniversary to be played in the U.S. has been long rumored, could be announced as soon as May 1st. That's big news. Now, it has sort of had some of the sting taken out of it by Sunil Gulati, who took to Twitter to say, it's a great idea, but we don't have an agreement yet. Now, the key word is yet, because there's clearly something happening behind the scenes between CONMEBOL and U.S. Soccer, and U.S. Soccer has to sign off on it. I think it's going to happen. Will the announcement come by May 1st? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I trust some of the people that work at BN Sport to know what they're talking about. Maybe Sunil Gulati's spinning things because there's a couple of details to get ironed out. We'll wait and see on that. The NASL season kicking off tomorrow. Indy 11 plays their first game in Indianapolis. Seen that all over my Twitter feed because I follow Peter Wilt, because I follow Tom Dunmore. Good guys. I wish the best of luck to Indy 11 in Indianapolis. Hopefully that team is a massive success. It has all of the hallmarks of a massive success. I know the rest of the NASL campaign kicking off. We didn't get a chance to talk to Bill Peterson ahead of the season. Maybe we'll try to grab him after the season starts, talk about the launch of 2014, where NASL is headed, all of those various lovely details out there for what is the de facto second division. Maybe they don't want to be one. Maybe they want to be equals with MLS. That would make for an interesting and potentially bad situation for American soccer once again. All right. Thank you very much to Musa Kwanga, Daniel Gordon. You have to see Hillsborough. Go set your DVR right now, unless you're going to watch it live. And Kyle McCarthy for joining us on today's show. It's been a fantastic week. Soccermorning.com, soccermorning.com, soccermorning.com. Please help out the show. We are listener supported. We need your support to keep us going. It's a World Cup year. Tons of stories. This show is an excellent example of what we can deliver day in and day out at Soccer Morning. I'm very proud of what we've done today. Thank you to producer Trevor for setting everything up. It's been an excellent program. Thank you to the callers. And I think that's going to do it, right? We're out of here. We're gone. We'll talk to you guys on Monday. Bye.
Boom, 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 boom. Gonna shoot you right down, right off of your feet. Take you home with me.